go ahead and call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the board. Welcome board members and guests to the Wednesday, May 26th, 2021 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. We're conducting this meeting via teleconference under Executive Order N2920 and N3320, approved by Governor Newsom. We appreciate your participation and patience with this technology. A recording of this meeting will be posted to our website after the meeting. Public comment. There will be multiple opportunities throughout this meeting for public comment. When I open up an item for public comment, please use the raised hand function to indicate that you would like to make a public comment on this item. If you're joining the webinar on your computer, you can do so by clicking the raised hand button on the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you're joining over the phone, you can do so by pressing *9. PCTPA staff will then call out individuals who've raised their hands, giving them permission to speak one by one. When you're called, please state your full name and city of residence. You'll then have a maximum of 3 minutes to provide your public comment, and PCTPA staff will notify you when your 3 minutes are up. If you experience technical difficulties and are unable to provide your public comment, please email your comments to, you've written it out phonetically now, thank you, Solvi Sable, our clerk at ssabol@pctpa.net. Board action, because this meeting is being conducted via teleconference, all votes will be roll call votes. Board members, we ask that you state your name prior to making your motion or second a motion for the record. And once an item has been moved and seconded, I'll request the city clerk or the clerk call the roll to vote. Thank you. And would you please stand and join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Who was rushing ahead? Was that you? Oh, all right. Sylvia, if you call the roll, please.
Amara. Together here. Amara.
Present.
Baker.
Here.
Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Present.
Holmes.
Here.
Howdeshelt. Joyner.
Here.
Jones. Wilkins.
Here.
Okay.
Hey, Paul, quick question. This is Dan Wilkins. If us folks that are on Zoom have a question or a comment on an item, how would you like us to interject without being rude about it?
Just jump in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just let me know. I may not see you. So I think all of us will keep an eye out for it. Sometimes if you raise your hand in the corner of the Zoom, it helps us to know you've got a question. You're a little bit in silhouette for me, so I can't see the subtleties of your expressions.
And I see you, Supervisor Jones.
All right, so we do have a quorum. We'll go ahead and move on to item C, approval of the action minutes for April 28th, 2021. Anyone have any questions or changes to the minutes?
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second, so we roll call, please.
Amara.
Yes.
Baker.
Aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Aye.
Holmes. Howdeshelt.
Aye.
Joyner.
Aye.
Jones.
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. We move on to item D, agenda review. Anyone requesting any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, I don't think we need to take an action on that. We'll just move on to public comment. Is there any member of the public wishing to make a comment on an item not on our agenda?
Chair Joyner, I'm not seeing any hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to item F, the consent calendar for Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They'll be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested citizen may request an item be removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Does any board member or member of the staff wish to remove an item for discussion? Any member of the public wishing to remove an item for discussion?
There are no raised hands at this time.
All right. In that case, I will accept a motion on the item.
Second, Broadway.
I have a motion and a second. So roll call, please.
Amara,
Yes.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Aye.
Holmes, Haudashelt, Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We move on to item G, consent calendar for the Placer County Airport Land Use Commission. Same rules apply. Any board member wishing to pull an item or member of the staff? Seeing none, any member of the public wish to pull an item on the Airport Land Use Commission calendar? I'll take the silence as none.
I don't see any hands raised at this time.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and take a motion.
Broadway, move approval.
Baker, second.
Motion Broadway, second Baker. Selby.
Amara,
Yes.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Aye.
Holmes,
Aye.
Haudashelt, Joyner,
Aye.
Jones,
Aye.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We move on to item H, the Placer Sacramento Action Plan Project Update. Ms. Hanlon.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm pleased to bring to you an update on our comprehensive corridor plan, the Placer Sacramento Mobility Action Plan. We'll begin with some background. This action plan uses the same study area as the previous Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan. As a reminder, that study area extends on Highway 65 from Lincoln down to the I-80 interchange and on Interstate 80 from Auburn down to the split, and then Business 80 down and across with the joint 50 connector to I-5. In the Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan, identified about 150 multimodal improvements that would improve this corridor along both stretches. This map shows those improvements based on modes. So as you can see, it really took a look at not just roadway improvements, but also bicycle and pedestrian, transit investments, and roadway management strategies, including ramp metering and managed lanes. Total, those projects come to $4.1 billion of needed investment along this corridor to get the infrastructure to where it really needs to be for Placer County and Sacramento County's growth. Through the Placer Sacramento Gateway Plan process, it prioritized 8 projects. These should look very familiar to everyone. These 8 projects were submitted for a Solutions for Congested Corridors Cycle 2 grant last year, and these program was fully awarded, and all these investments will begin moving forward with project development, including many in Placer County. Following the selection of those 8 projects, there are, however, 142 projects that still remain as needed for investment along this corridor. So once the Gateway Plan was adopted by this board in April of 2020, we began a process of updating it with the Placer Sacramento Action Plan to take a look at those remaining 142 projects and select which projects should be prioritized and move forward for the next cycle of competitive state and federal funds. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my project manager, president and CEO of Mark Thomas, Zach Spilliot, to finish the presentation.
Thanks, Kathleen. Good morning. As Kathleen mentioned, it was a very involved process. We had a significant amount of effort working with all of the various stakeholders that were part of this program. You can see here made up of all of the cities and counties within the region. Total of 14 different agencies were involved through this process. So when we're looking at $4.1 billion of investment and 142 individual projects, we needed to establish a framework to really develop a logical way to screen through these projects and find really key projects that would benefit the region and also be competitive for statewide and other federal grant opportunities. So how we did that is we looked at a certain set of criteria for each one of the projects that was represented in the Gateway study. These were looking at the status of the environmental clearance for each of the individual projects. The size of the project, is that project at a size where it would be competitive with various grant sources? There is a push for reduction of greenhouse gases. So vehicle miles traveled, VMT, is a key measurement that we're looking at for these projects. In addition to that, benefits to disadvantaged communities along the corridor. There are various disadvantaged communities. So how do these projects benefit those areas? And then safety has become more and more of a primary measurement to look at for projects that are moving forward. So these were the required criteria. In addition to that, there's so many others that we wanted to evaluate that are not just required, but we wanted to look at other desired classifications that would add to these projects. So items such as access to jobs and key destinations around the area, modal benefit, meaning are we looking at transit, are we looking at bike ped or vehicles? Operational benefit, are we improving operations on the freeways, local roads, or with transit service? One of the items that was a key is the local agencies' priorities. So as we're reaching out to all of the various local agencies, we wanted to get their perspective on what their individual agencies' priorities were for these projects. Along with that, again, looking at supporting the state housing guidelines. And then lastly, where is the project in its overall readiness? It could be a very high priority project, but if it's 20 years before this project is going to be a reality, we wanted to take that into account through our process. With that, we established 3 tiers of projects. Tier 1 is those projects that significantly align with all of those criteria that I just went over. Those are ones that are most near to being implemented. Tier 2 are projects that align with those criteria. They may just be a little bit further delayed potentially in their project development. And then tier 3 are those projects that, while they're represented in the action plan and the gateway study, they need a little more refinement in order to determine what are the benefits of that project. So with that tiering process, we then went through a more refined effort on those tier 1 projects, looking at how competitive and what is the primary benefit that these projects would provide to the region along the gateway study corridor. And again, just as a reminder, we had 4 primary modal benefits that we were looking at: general roadway capacity operation, transportation system management, which could be like managed lanes, or it could be carpool lanes, it could be other types of features like that. Transit for bus mobility or potentially third track extension, and then other bike and pedestrian projects. With that, this is the list of the projects that ranked on the top tier. I'm not going to go through them right now on the spreadsheet. We have individual slides that will go over each one of these projects. What I wanted to highlight with this spreadsheet, though, is the distribution of those projects by modal choice. So you can see that there are 2 projects that are in just that general freeway or roadway capacity category, 3 projects that are in the bicycle and pedestrian improvement category, 3 projects that are within that transportation system management, and then 3 projects that are in that transit improvement project. So it's very distributed by modal choice. In addition to that, we also wanted to look at where are these projects located throughout the region. So there are regional projects that cover both Sacramento and Placer counties. Those are the State Route 51 project, the Interstate 80 express lanes, the Sacramento to Roseville third track, and then a BRT bus rapid transit line that would connect into Placer County. There are also local projects that we wanted to highlight. So there are 5 local projects within the Placer County region. I'll step through these more on the next few slides. And then there are also 2 local projects within the Sacramento County region within this top tier 1 list. So as we step through these, the first project I wanted to highlight is the State Route 51 improvements. The total cost of this project it's roughly $440 million. It's improvements from downtown up past the Arden off-ramp along Business 80. Multiple improvements associated with widening the freeway, ramp improvements. There's a lot of work as part of this. It's currently in the preliminary design and environmental clearance phase with Caltrans, and there are ongoing active discussions with the Caltrans team to determine the status of this project and where it is in its project development. Next project is Watt Avenue improvements. Anyone that's driven along Watt Avenue, as you're approaching what is the McClellan Air Park, you pass underneath the Union Pacific Bridge there. And so you go from a 6-lane road down to a 2-lane undercrossing or a 4-lane undercrossing to each direction, but there are no sidewalks there. The pedestrian connection is through a tunnel that's off to the side. And so part of this project is widening the roadway, but then also including pedestrian and bicycle improvements as well. Currently, a project study report, feasibility study has been done. The county is looking for additional funding to complete the environmental and preliminary design work.
UPS is on board with that.
What was,
UPS is on board with that. I'm sorry. Union Pacific,
so Union,
doing an ad
I was
for you.
wondering where you were going with that.
there has been discussions with Union Pacific, and it's been really good coordination with the CCJPA third track team as well, because the corridor for the third track also crosses over that structure. Next project is one that's really local to where we are right now. So Auburn Folsom Road. These are improvements along Auburn Folsom Road for a few miles to add bicycle improvements. It's not proposed to add additional lanes, but want to provide for a regional bikeway along that roadway. It's such a good connection between Auburn and the Roseville Granite Bay area. So right now a project study report has been initiated. The city of Auburn is looking for funding to complete further segments of the project development. Dry Creek Greenway Phase 2 is another bicycle project. This is building upon the work that Roseville has done over the years with that facility. This would be the next segment that would be moving forward. They do have funding that was secured during the last cycle of the SB1 grant for construction. This would be the next segment that would be initiated. So currently they've completed the feasibility study. They would be then moving into the environmental clearance phase. Another project is City of Lincoln Boulevard. This is just parallel to Highway 65. It connects from Athens Way up to where the Lincoln bypass picks up from Lincoln Boulevard. This primarily is adding bicycle facilities and sidewalks along Lincoln Boulevard. Lincoln Boulevard doesn't necessarily need to be widened for capacity since you have the adjacent freeway, but there is an opportunity for adding bicycle and pedestrian facilities along Industrial Avenue and Lincoln Boulevard next to the Thunder Valley Casino.
And so what happened there was the name Lincoln Boulevard got stretched down further onto what used to be industrial.
That's correct. Another project to go over is from the TSM, that Transportation System Management category. This is I-80 express lanes. This would be conversion of the existing carpool lane from where it starts at the Sacramento River all the way up to the Highway 65 connection. So it's about 23 miles of managed lanes that would be added to I-80. So currently a project study report has been initiated. Caltrans District 3 is leading that effort in partnership with PCTPA staff. And the schedule for that is getting started this year, with then moving into the preliminary engineering and environmental clearance phase next year. To Highway 65, the connection at Highway 65, there's about 23 miles of carpool lanes along I-80.
Right.
When you come in from Sacramento, you cross over the bridge by West Sac. That's where the carpool lane begins, and it runs all the way through the Highway 65 interchange, where it ends just prior to the Rocklin Road interchange.
And what would this project do? I'm sorry.
This project would convert that existing HOV only lane into a managed lane where there would be allowed to have tolling for single occupancy vehicles to enter the
Fast
carpool lane.
track.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Okay. Another project that's really local to where we are right now is the Bell Road I-80 interchange. Placer County is moving forward with this project. It's in the preliminary design and environmental clearance phase. It is going to be reconstructing portions of that interchange to add roundabouts. Anyone that's gotten off going in the eastbound direction knows that you come off and there's the adjacent frontage road and there's a lot of conflicting movements there. So this would really clean up the operations of that interchange and make it much more efficient. The total amount of money that they've secured a fair amount of money for the project. What would be needed is the additional $7.5 million. So it's not that the total project cost is $7.5 million. This would just be the amount of additional funding that Placer County would need to complete that project. Another project is at Rocklin Road and I-80, the interchange there. Once school gets back in session, if you drive along that portion of I-80 during times where the school is in session, Sierra College is just directly off of Rockland Road there. It is a very congested interchange. The improvements that City of Rockland is looking at doing is to provide for increased operations there. So there's a very heavy movement in the morning for students getting to the campus and a very heavy movement in the afternoon as students are leaving the campus. So this is providing operational improvements at the interchange. We've talked about it already, but just another project that's included as a tier 1 project is the Sacramento to Roseville third track. There's been a lot of good partnership with CCJPA throughout this whole process. And this would be phase 1 of the Sacramento to Roseville third track. It essentially picks up from just east of Watt Avenue, the overcrossing that we were talking about for Sacramento County, and it goes into the Roseville yard. This improvement allows CCJPA to increase the number of trains that they can operate between Sacramento and Roseville. Currently, they only do 1 round trip a day. With this improvement, they can increase that to 3 round trips a day. Now, ultimately, as the improvements continue along the third track into later phases, that allows CCJPA to increase the number of round trips to 10 round trips a day. So it's a really important connection for not just Sacramento to Roseville connection, but as the region expands and we look at integrating with some of the work that's going on in the Bay Area. Coupled with the Sacramento to Roseville third track, City of Sacramento and its partners with Regional Transit are moving forward with improvements to the Sac Valley Station, which is located downtown along I Street. There's various improvements there. This would just be one phase of the improvements that are needed. It's going to be constructing a bus mobility center, which allows for increased partnership with various transit providers, Placer County Transit, El Dorado, SAC-RT. So it allows better access for bus mobility into the Sac Valley Station, which then allows for CCJPA to increase their ridership. As part of this project, Regional Transit also has to do some modifications to their tracks. So there's various phases. This is just phase 1. City of Sacramento did just recently complete their environmental document, so they are moving forward with final design activities on this project. Last project to highlight is the North Watt Avenue Bus Rapid Transit. Regional Transit, SAC Regional Transit has a number of BRT lines that they are evaluating. This has a lot of benefit in that it's connecting that primary corridor that we're looking at with the gateway study between Placer County and Sacramento County along the I-80 corridor. So this would be a connection along Watt Avenue. It would terminate at the existing Watt Avenue RT station, which is located right there along I-80. And it continues up Watt Avenue into Western Roseville. So it's a really good connection for that portion of the county. So just a quick summary then on what are the next steps. There was a lot of effort that went into this process with meetings with all of the various cities and partners in the Gateway study. Where we're going through 2021 is we're going to continue to refine the action plan, working with our communities to actually review the document and get that document finalized. In the fall of this year, we're going to be releasing more detailed renderings for these projects to help better explain the benefits of the top tier projects that would be moving forward for the next cycle of potential grant funding sources. And then where we go forward from here into 2022, we're expecting at the next cycle of SB1 applications to be released in the 2022 year. So in the winter, early part of next year, we would be coming back to this board for consideration on those groupings of projects that would be submitted for grant funding. And then we'll continue to work with CTC partners, evaluate the guidelines that are going to be issued for that next funding source, and then ultimately submit our program of projects for consideration through the CTC. So with that, we can open it up for any questions.
All right. Any questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Holmes.
Yeah, thank you. I need a little bit more clarification about the I-80 Rockland Road interchange. If you're driving westbound and turn off on Rockland Road to go to Sierra College, I know that's all pretty congested. So are both sides of the interchange going to be taken care of? Is that part of the project?
That's correct. It would be both ramps. So in the morning, we need to address the congestion that occurs for that heavy right turn movement that goes towards the school. And then in the afternoon, we need to address both intersections because you have a very heavy movement coming back to turn onto westbound I-80.
Yeah.
So there's improvements that are needed at both ramp terminals to allow for that increase in traffic.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So just a curiosity for me as we begin to talk about bus rapid transit between Lincoln and Roseville. The North Watt Avenue bus rapid transit, $31 million. What's involved in that? I get it. You got to buy buses, you got to hire new staff, but $31 million to run a line of buses. There must be more that I'm missing.
That's correct. It is fairly involved in that there's the cost for purchasing the equipment, like you mentioned, the buses and staffing the additional routes. There is a cost just in the O&M that's involved in that. In addition to that, what we are looking at is other improvements along that corridor that make that operation better. So are there
physical infrastructure?
Physical infrastructure, yeah. So it could be signal modifications at the intersections or localized roadway widening that's needed to account for bus stops along the way. So there is physical infrastructure that's needed. And then there are modifications that would also be included at the I-80 RT facility there to accept that additional bus traffic.
Okay.
And I'll add that with the delivery of that project, it would be an electric route, given its timing and state requirements. So charging considerations and the cost of purchasing electric vehicles are also counted in that cost.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you. Appreciate that. One last shot.
We have
Anyone?
a question from board member Amara online, I believe.
All right.
Hi, yes, thank you very much. And what an excellent presentation. I really appreciate it. My only question is, I certainly, from a perspective of Auburn, enjoy having all the additional bike trails, especially the one on Auburn Folsom Road. I guess my question is, will there be an opportunity to have some sort of safety feature like even cat eyes that would delineate the bike trail so that it is very safe, or at least safer than just a white line whereby it's quite easy to have both the cyclist and the car collide?
I can take that. There's that project is still really early in its project development, so it hasn't been decided the exact layout of where the facility will be added. Given the high speeds and the curvy nature of that road, I would guess that there would be safety improvements put in place similar to what's being looked at 193 in Lincoln. So it's certainly a consideration for the safety of cyclists along that road.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Sandy. Anyone else? If not, I'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to comment on this item?
Yes, Chair Joyner, we do have one hand raised at this time.
Mr. Garabedian.
Good morning, Mike Karabedian. Glad to have this opportunity to raise the question of passenger rail traffic north of Sacramento and the Sacramento region. Right now, last time I looked at the state rail plan, that contemplates the rail traffic going north from Natomas. And we would suggest and hope and support for an effort that would have this passenger rail traffic going north through Roseville, Lincoln, Yuba County, and Butte County. There was a study in the past about rail traffic, a phase one in Butte County of that route. So that would be a long-term thing we would hope would be begin planning for, so that the those we are connected through Roseville, Lincoln, to the rest of the country to the north. Thanks for this chance to mention this.
Thank you, Mr. Garabedian. Anyone else in the public?
There are no other hands raised.
All right, thank you. Maybe we want to address that just for a moment. It's been discussed in the past. I don't think Union Pacific is all that willing.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to indicate that we are, as we've advised the board in the past, we are in the middle of preparing a preliminary feasibility study for passenger rail service to Lincoln. We're hopeful to have that study in a public meeting coming here in the early summer, and at which time there will be a thorough analysis of rail feasibility to Lincoln. As you know, we've hired a firm out of Arlington, Virginia, and it's part of the settlement with the Sierra Club for the SR 65 widening project.
All right. Thank you, Mike. All right. Well, that was an information item only. So one last chance for comments. None. Thank you both very much. Much appreciated. I have no idea where all that money is going to come from, but if we find it, we've got a line of projects to do. Item I, final FY 2021-22 overall work plan and budget. Mr. Lucan.
Good evening, good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the PCTPA board. What you have in front of you today is consideration of the final OWP and budget for FY 21-22. As you recall, we brought the preliminary OWP and budget to you earlier this year, as is the normal course of action. That OWP is then after the preliminary OWP, after it's approved by the board, it is then submitted to Caltrans for their normal review. We have done that and added a number of small changes and clarifications for Caltrans and incorporated those in the document. We also take the opportunity, since the OWP, the preliminary, was approved earlier, to make any changes that has happened since then. We've made some small adjustments to work element 46 to comply with the grant that is funding the topic that was just discussed by the board, as well as some adjustments to the work element 61, which is the funding strategy, and work element 27, which is our airport land use plan. So some minor adjustments to those items as indicated in the staff report. Staff has presented you a balanced budget with a 0.7% increase over the FY 21-22 budget, and does incorporate the agency's $830,000 contingency fund, which is an increase from last year's OWP and budget. We have a reimbursable amount of about 46 to 47% in our budget, which helps offset costs to our member agencies and jurisdictions overall. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on the OWP.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Questions from the board? No. Looking out into cyberspace, not seeing any questions from the board there. Any questions or comments from the public?
Chair Joyner, there is one hand raised.
All right. Mr. Garabedian.
Hello again. A note on the OWP programs. We continue to oppose the Placer Parkway, the 8065 interchange, the Highway 65 widening, and added from Measure M of 2016, the Baseline Road widening. We would continue to oppose these as a Measure M2 effort and also as part of this work program. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Garabedian. Anyone else?
We do have one other hand raised.
Mr. Euler.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. You had a comment? Kirk, you muted.
There we go. I thought I had done it. I'm sorry. Good morning. On behalf of the major employers that the Placer Business Alliance represents in Placer County, we just want to say we support this work program and look forward to your support of it moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Euler. Anyone else?
No other hands raised.
All right.
Mr.
Seeing
Chair.
none. I'll accept a motion on the item.
Move to adopt resolution 21-20, authorizing the executive director to submit the attached final FY 2021-2022 overall work program and budget to Caltrans.
You are remarkably fast on the draw.
For a second.
Burris was the second. All right.
Amara,
Yes.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Aye.
Holmes, Howdeshelt,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We move on to item J, traffic congestion report presentation. Mr. Hoyt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, it's our monthly report on our traffic trends in Placer County, and we've been doing this since last fall 2020. And the slides today will look just a bit different on some of the items. As I presented last month, actually traffic on State Route 65 and Interstate 80 actually had exceeded what they did back in March of 2020, because that was really the first month where we went into lockdown and our traffic volumes dropped. So I've changed up a few of the slides to look more at how traffic looks now versus what it did back in 2019, and for just a better comparison. So we'll start off with this. One of the first slides that you'll see, if you go on to the next one, is I'm going to look at daily traffic volume. So we've shown on this map traffic volumes as you've seen in the past, but this is focused on daily for State Route 65, Interstate 80, both east and west, or on Interstate 80 east and west of State Route 65. I've also included traffic volumes for State Route 89 and 267 in the Tahoe area. Two of the facilities that aren't listed on here that really probably should be listed are State Route 49 and a portion of State Route 174. The reason why they're not shown on here is Caltrans does not have loop detectors on these facilities that allow us to generate the same data that you're seeing on the screen here. And so all this information does come from Caltrans loop detectors through their PIMS database. What's being shown here is that traffic in April of 2021 is higher on each of these facilities than it was in both 2020 and even in 2019, with the exception of Interstate 80 just east of State Route 65. And this would be in between State Route 65 and the Rockland Road interchange. And at that level, the 2021 volumes on that portion of I-80 are only 2% lower than they were back in 2019 when Sierra College students were on campus. So what we're really seeing here is that one, traffic has returned and actually is higher than it was in most cases, anywhere between 5 and 10% higher than it was back in 2019. So really signifying people are back out driving. They're going places. We don't know exactly where everyone's going yet, but what the loop detectors are telling us, at least from April, is that they are higher than the 2 consecutive years for that month. Next slide. We've also received information from the city of Roseville, and we've wanted to share this today just as another example of what's happening on the local roads, because our prior presentations have all focused on the our highway system. City of Roseville does track traffic volumes through their cameras at their intersections and loop detectors as well. And it's kind of hard to see. This is a little bit busy of a graphic, but let me walk you through it. There's 10 locations here that the city is tracking volumes at. If you can see those light gray bars, that's a delineator between each of the intersections. And so we start from the left at Galleria, Roseville Parkway. We also have Pleasant Grove at Roseville Parkway, Douglas at Sierra College Boulevards, and several others in here that you can see at the bottom. But the area that I want to point you to is there's a first blue bar and really kind of a second blue bar that bracket the end of those. And what the city is seeing is that traffic volumes for this last month are almost as high as they were within 95% of the pre-COVID levels at their top 10 intersections within the city. So very similar story of what's happening locally as what's happening on our state highway system. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go into the next slide that's going to show a little bit more familiarity to you, which we show the traffic volumes and speeds during different parts of the day. Next slide. And so on this slide is State Route 65. We're showing this right around the Pleasant Grove interchange. On the left-hand side of your screen is the hourly traffic volumes and speeds for the southbound direction. And on the right side of your screen is the hourly volume and traffic speeds for the northbound direction. What we're seeing here is a trend in terms of hourly distribution of traffic that in the blue lines, we're right about where we were for 2019, and in some cases higher. You can still see that we still don't have that morning commute period in the southbound direction there, that the blue line has shifted out a few hours there before it really hits its peak. But coincidentally, in the northbound direction, it tracks right as it was at 2019. So I wish I had the answer of where everyone is going at this point in time. We still know that a lot of our employees in Placer County who would have commuted to downtown for various jobs, downtown Sacramento, still are not working there at full capacity and really a part-time basis at most. So we'll move on to the next slide there. And we're in transition to Interstate 80. So next slide. Here we're looking at Interstate 80 around the Riverside to the Placer Sacramento County line area. Interstate 80 is following some similar trends here, where we can see that our morning trend in the westbound direction was on the left side of the screen. The traffic volumes there don't quite hit the same peak they did back in April of 2019, but very close. But we do see in the afternoons and actually the evening that we do have more traffic occurring than what happened in 2019. Very similar story in the eastbound direction, you can see there as well. Next slide. As we move up between State Route 65 and Rockland Road interchange, there's some similarities there that I've talked about, with the exception of in the westbound direction. We don't have that high level traffic that's occurring really before probably noon. It does track very similarly through the afternoon and evening hours, but you can see by that gray line there on the left side of your screen for the hourly traffic volumes, there is a much more pronounced traffic pattern that was happening early in the morning up into around probably 9 o'clock. And then we really start to see the similarities occur in terms of that bell curve there. Next slide. So we had also recently pulled some traffic information for the state route facilities in the Tahoe area, and we shared those at a community presentation last week. So I thought I'd incorporate those into our presentation today. So next slide, if you could. Traffic here is really kind of follows a similar pattern where we see that peaks are actually occurring more so than they did in 2019 and 2020. And for any of our participants, either online or board members who participated in last week's presentation in Tahoe, that information there was from January, and actually there's a correction that should be made on the screen. What you're seeing is actually data for April. So in January, traffic volumes look almost identical for the last 2 years, but in April, we've seen things change. This could be part of the seasonality of traffic that occurred, maybe in the January timeframe where we have snow and there's skiers and visitors coming up for the winter sports, where in April, we're kind of in the in-between session there of activities. But what we did notice is there's much more pronounced traffic that is occurring during the month of April on State Route 89. And this could be due to additional visitors during the week, or this could be just the number of additional residents that have moved or are now living full-time in the Tahoe area. So next slide. State Route 267 will be our next focus area. So next slide. And again, here, there should be a correction at the top. It does say January, but it should be April. Here, we're seeing similar trends where the 2021 traffic numbers do tend to follow those same bell curve shapes, but are higher than they were in 2019 and 2020. So that there is the end of the slides I want to share in terms of traffic. So we are back where we were, and actually a little bit higher than traffic volumes used to be in 2019. And part of that could be as messages that Mike has presented or I have shared in the past. We don't have as many people riding transit as we used to, and that could be one of the reasons we are seeing higher traffic volumes. Also, maybe greater flexibility in the stay-at-home or work-from-home environment that allows people to do discretionary trips during the day where they used to not be able to do this. So with that, I'll be glad to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Any questions from the board? Bruce?
Yeah, do we also have information on traffic? I'm sorry, on accidents? I know in my commute from downtown to Roseville, I've noticed, a few more accidents along the I-80 corridor.
So we don't, at this point in time, have the most recent traffic data. Often that traffic data follows about a year behind from CHP. However, Mike and I have received this question a number of times recently. And so we are working with the CHP to see what data we can get that is the most current.
All right, any other questions from the board before I take it to the public? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to comment on this item from the public?
There are no hands raised at this point in time, Chair.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. It's an information item only. It's always interesting to see. I'm a bit surprised to see those numbers exceeding 2019. I guess I'm curious to put population growth numbers alongside of that and see if that accounts for a large portion of that, or if people's patterns during COVID have simply changed and they're more flexibility in their schedules to be able to move about. But thank you for that report. With that, we'll move on to the executive director's report. Mr. Lucan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just to add on to the discussion there, we are all of our expectations with the return fully to school with K-8, which is already occurring, with employment returning in the fall. Some of our major employers are timing either the June 15th date that the governor has or September as a return to work date. And then we're going to be having all of our 3 universities, William Jessup, Sac State, and UC Davis back in session. Our expectations at this point is that traffic will be severe come fall, much higher than we have ever seen. And as Aaron points out, because transit is still challenged with the thought that there is potential for contamination from COVID-19 on public transit, that thought is still out there, even though there's been zero contact tracing back to any public transit system in the world. There is still an effort that needs to be made to re-engage the public and reconvince them to utilize public transit, especially as they've now used their single occupancy vehicles and returned to the familiarity and the ease sometimes of using single occupancy vehicles. So come October, it's all expectations is that in Placer County, it will be severe. So in terms of the executive director's report, I have a number of things to report to you. First of all, our recruitment for our deputy director position. As you know, and we've been briefing the board at prior meetings and other avenues, we've been going through a process of recruiting a new deputy executive director after our longtime deputy executive director, Luke McNeil-Caird, took another job to go work in the private sector. So in accordance with our personnel rules and in consultation with our board chair, Mr. Joyner, we began this process in March. We had a very good recruitment process. We received 13 very qualified applicants and their packages for us to consider. And we interviewed the top 5 of those candidates. Due to the applicants' confidentiality, as some of the applicants were actually working for our local jurisdictions, we asked former Roseville mayor and former PCTPA board member Susan Rohan to help us in the interviews of those 5 applicants. Of the 5, we then chose 3 of those applicants to come and meet our staff to look at fit, which is very important. And as a result of that, I'm happy to report, and I have offered, and he has accepted, Rick Carter, who is Sacramento County's Department of Transportation Manager of Capital Projects, has accepted the position, and he will start work on June 21st. Rick will be here at our board meeting, our next June board meeting. But in summary, he has over 27 years of experience in transportation with Caltrans, El Dorado County Department of Transportation, the City of Elk Grove, and now with Sacramento County Department of Transportation. He's managed large and small capital projects all the way through to construction. He's managed transportation funding programs for Elk Grove and Sacramento County. And he's even worked on the South Sacramento County transit operations. So we bring to someone to our team that has transit experience as well. We're very happy with this and happy to get a full staff back on board in late June. Do you have any questions on that before I move on?
I see none.
The second recruitment that we have going on is for our fiscal and administrative officer. As we previously reported, Shirley LeBlanc, our longtime fiscal administrative officer, announced her retirement effective June 30th. In late March, we began the recruitment process for a new FAO to replace Shirley. Unfortunately, we only received, even though we had a very wide distribution and assistance, we only received 2 applications for that position. We interviewed both applicants, but we did not find a fit for our agency. So we have modified our job flyer for that position. And earlier this week, we went out and are distributing that and are hopeful that we will receive a good number of applications by the deadline of June 21st. Shirley has offered to extend her departure date, which I can't emphasize how important that is to have her here, not only up until the applicant gets here, but with a training period. Hopefully that will enable cross-training between the new individual and Shirley. It will be a great benefit. Her job is very, very important to our agency, and as much transition time as possible would be a benefit to the agency. Questions on that?
Anything from the board?
Okay. A couple other things to report on our Placer Rides program. As you know, the board took action at our last meeting to implement Placer Rides, and Kathleen continues to make progress on the implementation of that. And just wanted to report a couple things that she's been doing and we've been doing as an agency to help prepare for the start of that. She's had several listening sessions with My Rides drivers and presented changes to a number of agencies, including the Roseville Transportation Commission, the Placer Collaborative Network, and the Placer County Older Adults Advisory Commission. She continues to engage other stakeholder groups in the social service arena, which is the prime candidates of applicants and riders in this program. And based upon the board's direction, the program's reimbursement form will include driver signatures and monthly and quarterly reports created to potentially minimize any potential fraud that could exist in this program, even though with the other programs around the state, this has not been an issue. But certainly that was a concern of the board, and we wish to minimize the potential of that whenever possible. Kathleen has been working with Seniors First and the Agency on Aging Area 4 to resolve the funding requirements for that program, and we anticipate a quick resolution to that issue. So the gentleman that spoke from Area 4 Agency on Aging, we're engaging with those questions. We're looking at other counties, how they implemented the same types of programs, and we're going to be coming up with a solution to that very shortly. And all told, we're hoping for a successful rollout of this new program, which is still targeted at July 1st. The next item to report to you is on our funding strategy. As alluded to in several of our presentations this morning, we are completing our outreach program to look at priorities for transportation countywide. We've now completed 14 of 15 outreach meetings. We have one left tomorrow night in Southeast and Central Roseville. And we are working potentially on an additional one up in Lincoln with Sun City Lincoln Hills, looking at something. We're trying to schedule that for sometime in June and working with Councilmember Bill Loretson on that endeavor. We are finalizing our June polling. Our polling subcommittee met on Monday and reviewed the draft poll. Those changes recommended by the polling subcommittee were included in the revised polling document. And our expectation is that polling would start on June 1st and extend likely through approximately June 15th. That polling subcommittee would then meet again on June 21st prior to the June board meeting to go over those results, and then the full results would be reported to the board on June 23rd. Our hope is that this poll will help us determine the geography of future efforts. It really depends upon the results of the poll, but our hope is that. However, staff is likely to be recommending that we have a tracking poll done in October. Because we are not quite out of the woods in terms of the pandemic, people are not back to work. We're not past the governor's changes to our COVID-19 pandemic requirements. And again, as mentioned earlier, our universities and our employers are not back in session. So we're going to be recommending a October poll also be done, and the results of both June and October used to make a decision whether we move forward to 2022 or we delay until 2024. The last thing I have to report in very brief format for such a comprehensive topic is the governor's climate action plan for transportation investment. This is something that's Kathleen and I both been following for many months. It is the governor's proposal for how to address climate change through investment of transportation funds. I would say most of the state is in support. Probably 3/4 of the MPOs and other agencies like ours, our TPAs, are in complete support of CAPTI. It does present a challenge to us in terms of its investment restrictions against capacity increasing projects. And as Kathleen and Zach discussed today, that is a principal reason why we included in the action plan a competitive component to meet these guidelines. But it is going to be very challenging, at least at the state level, to get our projects such as 8065 and the 65 interchange and our interchanges like Rocklin Road funded without being very, very creative. And also we'll need to focus with those expansion projects on funding at the federal level. So I just wanted to kind of report to you that we're continuing to monitor these CAPTI guidelines. SACOG has submitted a letter of support for these guidelines as well. We are still working with the Rural Counties Task Force and some other suburban counties to request a exemption, if you will, for safety related projects. We think that's probably the only exception that they may allow for these. So if there's a situation with that a road needs to be widened for forest fire or some other natural disaster, we may be able to get that project funded with CAPTI in place. But that's likely the only change in terms of expansion related projects that's likely to happen. So with that, I'll conclude my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, one more chance at questions or comments. No, all right. Would we normally open it up to the public on this?
Good.
I think we will. Go ahead and open it up to the public. Anyone wishing to comment?
We do have one comment from the okay, Mr. Garabedian.
Hello, thank you. Mike Garabedian. Just a thought or two on the polling mechanism. It seems very much an effort to try to find the path of least resistance for the plans that have been underway for some years. And this, as a method of transportation planning, this has some disadvantages, if not faults. Whereas a better approach might be exploring other project priority support, or adjusting what projects are being trying to be sold to the public. So just a thought about what makes for good transportation planning results and what might not. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Garaviti. Anyone else?
There are no other hands raised in the online chat.
All right. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to board direction to staff. Anyone wishing to give any sort of direction to staff at this point? Seeing none, we'll move on. Item M is information items. You have a plethora of those in your packet for your perusal. Our next scheduled meeting is June 23rd, 2021. And unless
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing, which relates to our next meeting is our expectation at the next meeting is that we would recommend that we open to the public for that meeting. So in addition to continuing on the virtual environment, we would open the chambers. Unless the governor goes in some different direction, we would open the chambers to allow the public to come here in person.
is there any anticipation? I know you probably can't answer this. We haven't been able to find anything that the governor may rescind his orders regarding the Brown Act and the ability to do a hybrid meeting.
Yeah, we don't, there's several bills going through the legislature to address that right now. And so we don't really have a sense of either those, the potential passage of those bills. Some of those are very draconian in nature and would actually make it harder or make the requirements for access more difficult. Some of them would go in the other direction and make it easier. So it's at this point, it's kind of up in the air.
Okay. I've actually found it useful to give even more access to the public. It takes some getting used to in this environment. But with all sorts of eyes on the screens for me, all of us looking out for one another, I think it's been very, very helpful to engage the public more broadly as we move forward. I personally would like to see it folded into the inventory when you have the technology as this chamber does. It may mean some investment in a community like mine and some alterations to our chambers, but I think for the public's sake, access, it's actually been a very good and useful thing. And I think it's probably increased transparency significantly. So hopefully we can continue in a similar format and with the public back in the chambers if they wish to be. So if there's nothing else.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to,
Yes.
we had a municipal advisory council meeting now, Horseshoe Bar Penryn. And we've also had one with the Newcastle Oper. And we have more participants online. These meetings are held at 6 o'clock at night. It's just more convenient. Last night we had more than 20 people online that participated and were asking questions. So it's just sometimes we have the typical 3 members that show up. One of them we see here today. But it's really a new way of reaching out to the public where they don't want to leave home and come down to a meeting with the, in a stuffy old building. So anyhow, it's working well. I think
Good.
continue.
Good. I think what I've seen is members of the public who would be afraid to come to this podium
Yeah.
and speak to us in front of an audience.
Yeah.
Are more comfortable sitting in their living room or in their home office or on a phone line, frankly, and asking their questions. So again, I think it's been additive. I'm curious, those meetings must be rural in nature. So how are you able to bring the technology to those meetings to have that hybrid meeting?
Yeah, they, I do it in my office and Beverly in her office. And so people just get online. They have access. Yeah.
Oh, it's all Zoom?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, to the extent the system doesn't. We had a call this morning and nobody, it was Microsoft Teams. a work call on the drought, and for some reason, Microsoft Teams just had an epic failure. Nobody could get on, so we had to go to a conference call. And I know it was at SACOG, I sat in for the mayor last week at SACOG, and they're looking at this hybrid model where they have satellite.
Yeah.
You know, so somebody can go to a satellite. We're probably too small for that, right? But you can be, to the extent, I mean, I think that there is more, the quality of the input you get often is better. I know at the, you know, city council, we have a call-in number, you know, wait 30 seconds, turn your TV down, right? But the quality and the understanding of the comments are better when they're in person. And, you know, of course, there's nonverbal, right? That is important, but I'm glad to hear we're back.
If the governor's order is rescinded and none of these bills are actually approved, you know, public participation will not change. I mean, we certainly can implement as we're doing now. What will change though is with board member attendance at meetings, and SACOG is looking at this is when a board member meets remotely, that location will have to be open to the public and noticed to be open to the public. That's how it used to be. And
Right.
so without any changes, and if we go back to how it was, that will be the difficulty with this using of Zoom by board members.
And we talked about it a little bit. Was that yesterday, the day before? They're all blending together now. So the governor may rescind his order, but Cal OSHA may not change the rules. So we have a conflict there that may keep everything in place despite the governor rescinding his orders. So I guess we work our way forward and hope for the best. If there is nothing else, I'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.